Greetings and welcome to PROBREACTION 2. This time I want to discuss something about the nature of this perceived evil. I've just written in a message, the biggest problem that I can see that most people have is, the best analogy is if we look into the past and we think of structures like Baalbek compared to a modern house. The scale, how again it goes back to reducing humanity. Neville Goddard talks about it as we are co-creators, we are God in the most constricted form. Whatever way you look at this, it's all pointing in the same direction. Paul on Black Sheep Researcher has done a wonderful video on the IXI, and if you think it's like two pillars with an X between, that's where humanity is. We're caught in that crossfire between the pillar and the post. It's also the twin caduceus. Again, Paul, Black Sheep Researcher channel, talks about Janus, and being that it's the two-faced God, is expressed as the twin-headed eagle. It is something that is encouraged in us right from the word go. The whole system, the education system, we're in competition with each other. I was watching a Greg Braden, very recent, I think it's Expo, I think it was Los Angeles from this year. And it's very much still the mindset of the Darwinian survival of the species through competition. The best will survive, and that is played out. So you can see it in everyday life, how people will go for the short-term gain by being two-faced, and they may be competing for a job with a colleague who they're friends, but they will whisper something to their boss's ear that's going to affect who gets that promotion, because they're being two-faced. There's an instant example of how we've all got this Janus in us, because Jan us. So this system, this evil that is playing this role on this world stage, it goes back to the journey of the little soul, the children's books, that a spirit wants to come and experience in this creation, needs an opposition. Levette on her channel talks it in terms of astrology as the eternal battle of fire and ice, and fire is associated with red, divine masculine, and ice is associated with blue, which is associated with divine feminine. So how many times have they played out the battle of the sexes, competing against each other? See, this all comes back. This is all getting us to focus on the particle, the solid, identifying as this reality as being the only reality and hiding the other 99%. It's all, many ways, illusion. Now, I would say that the they or them are the ones that are referred to as those mystery sea people. If you look at the architecture, especially the old architecture, the plaster facades, the faces, the masks on the buildings, you'll see watery themes, mermaids, seashells. Actually, there's a place called Seychelles as well. Which probably does fit into this. So there's always a watery theme. Now, what is it that's said about that water is? It is a form of air which holds spirit. You have water sprites, water spirits. What I'm suggesting, somewhere within the waveform, that these mystery sea people were either brought through or came through. But remember also, and it's another perfect example I mentioned in the last video, the film Predator, He rips out the spine and the brain. It's the physical representation of the spirit. But just think of the word predator. Predate tor, which is a bull or a door. So they're before time. It backs up basically what it's saying in Genesis about fallen angels. Everything has fallen into this solid particle state reality, whichever side you go with. The way I look at this personally is that this control system, in the role that they're playing, have used up all their spiritual oil and they've sold out, they sell out. So you're basically turning yourself inside out, which is what this reality is all about, of giving you reverses, the law of mirrors, as I called it. So Phoenician sea people, they can be described as Babylonians, they can be described as Assyrians, Egyptians, Rome, pretty much everything, every secret society, because that is their tree of life, that is their tree of death. Because this is the reality, this particle reality is all about death. There is nothing out there that is not subject to time and does not go through a cycle and then becomes something else. In the form of these human vessels, you would basically become part of the nutrients of the soil again. And this is something where what the dark side, the perceived evil side, are actually doing is giving a very mirrored way of showing you how to do things, because you'll notice that they are the experts at recycling beyond anything. There is nothing wasted. If you think about fields and this whole food chain, well, what comes out those muck spreaders? It's animal waste. So basically what you're eating, even if you're vegan, you're eating shit. Think about it that way. In this physical form, it's all about degrading humanity, as Matt on Quantum of Conscience has put it. So let's look at something very real, which I think will also tie in some bits and pieces. It's been suggested the catacombs, amongst many other places, and I think it is all to do with the thickness of the skull bone, primarily, and it's also, you have the thigh bones in there, the biggest possible bones, or the thickest bones. And if you neatly stack these skulls, when that saying "putting our heads together" comes from, no doubt, it creates a battery bank which is called piezoelectricity. Martin Leaker channel has looked into this, so I'd refer you over. It's quite an old video now, but it is worth, if you want to have an understanding of this energy aspect. This might seem all a little bit convoluted, but it does all tie in together. Now, when we talk in terms of astrology, like the vet talks about the battle of fire and ice, well, as I've said, in every spiritual, there is also a physical reality to it. So just think about this. When you stand outside in the sunlight and then the sunlight goes because a cloud is obscuring it, you notice straight away the temperature change. But if you are a high altitude pilot, you'll notice they wear insulated clothing. They're closer to the sun. Now, if we can feel the difference in the heat here, surely they should be getting warmer. Well, that would suggest that the higher you go is colder. The air gets colder. Regardless of whatever you think about the Earth, I think it's fair to say that there is a sort of molten hot layer. Maybe you're seeing where this is going now. The battle of fire and ice. Because I think probably the best analogy I can give here is when you think of the blacksmith and the forge, where you forge and shape and create something. It's superheated iron or whatever metal, and it's plunged into its opposition. And you get that hiss where that metal will basically scream with the sudden change that will have an effect on the molecular structure of the thing, because it is such a total contrast. In the same way that you can get frostbite, ice and fire will both burn. So, the piezoelectricity, the recycling. Another example of this, I can't remember the number of it, but I mentioned it in a video about a year ago, and other channels, I think Martin Leaker mentioned this, and possibly UAP channel. There's a US patent for the use of human blood in building construction. There's something to think about. I told you they don't waste anything. Think of bone meal. What bones are we talking about here? Make no bones about it. These little sayings keep coming in, I know, but these old sayings are rooted in something, and we need to start really listening when you hear those old sayings like putting your heads together. What does it really mean? There's a good and a bad aspect. I mean, putting out great minds to come together in the spiritual sense, but if it's in the physical sense, it's bashing heads together. You're at loggerheads is another expression. It's opposition again, an imposed opposition normally by this system. Again, it is shown to you, one of the perceived aspects of evil is to do with secret societies, and in particular Freemasons. Well, what is one of the primary symbols of Freemasonry? None other than the compass. The compass is also known as a divider. So you've got division being shown right there. So where have we got to? So yes, another little bit of etymology for you. The focus is always of conflict is always on the Middle East. So I looked at Middle East and I had a play with it. So it's set L as timid, or it as meddle. So the story with these sea people, these mystery sea people, is suggested that they came through a portal in Mauritius. Now Mauritius, more riches, more righteous, possibly comes from that. It seems to allude to that. I think it was Martin Leaker's channel only the other day was showing about the people from there. Don't look exactly African, don't look exactly Asiatic. It's like like he suggested, a last outpost, because it's an island, not the part of the main continent of a previous civilization with a people that haven't been displaced, or possibly have been displaced. I don't know the ins and outs or the exact chronology of any of this. The devil is always in the detail. It's just the overall picture, and I'm only using the past because I want to steer this whole channel and anybody listening to it to, yeah, you've looked at Tatari, you've looked at Flat Earth, you've looked at NASA, or whatever, any other event in this particle reality, and the overall, well, the same message keeps coming back that everything is a lie. So what about us? We're more than we appear to be. The fact that you have this system, which, no matter how much of it you see, but once you start seeing things on those bulbic size scale proportions, you realise that their tree of life, their tree of death, is pretty much the same sort of pattern, like veins. It worms its way into every pie. There is nothing that is not affected by it. As Greg Braden said, scientists will make these discoveries and publish them in little-known journals and things that the public don't get to see, because the political agenda wants to keep things in a framework which then frames us. This whole thing with this 666, I mean, the letter L, which is, or L, E-L, Elohim, which is so much associated with Satan, Saturn, evil. Well, let me ask you this. Who's having the rings run around them? So which planet would then look to be associated with us, which Levet has said about the connection between Saturn, and there's also Saturn reference to being the black sun. Well, the black hole sun, the internal sun, well, it will be in a black hole if it's inside these physical vessels, will it not? So that role is to stop you finding your true potential. That's what it's always been. I want to... This theatre is just like a film set. There is real things and a lot of special effects, but the reality part of it, let's look at that. Let's talk about those direct energy weapons that seem to be a thing that... The theme, whether you're looking at San Francisco, Market Street, Dresden, California, paradise, that's their idea of paradise, you see. See how it's a mirror? It's anything but paradise now. I don't think it's all it's cracked up to be. But I think there's a lot more to this. And why wouldn't these things be happening every day, everywhere? The world is a stage and things are done in stages, but you have to ask why. And this is why I look inside again. But it's also shown in the physical and the outside. We want to get to the heart of the matter. Everything radiates out from the heart. So in the same way, everything must radiate out from the earth, and it certainly does with lightning. What you see with the fork lightning where it's coming down is the arcing back. The word arc arches back to Janus again, but it's all about arcing. Now, going back to that analogy with the blacksmith, with the fire and ice, what if it is some sort of energy beam that acts like a switch that actually will draw up the hot molten at a controlled rate? Think what you could do with that. You could actually soften the ground and sink entire cities. Their own weight on the softened ground would pull them down. It's shown in recent videos with things where people have got gardens where suddenly all this compressed water will come up, this muddy sludge will come up. There's your mud floods as well. So what's the piezoelectricity in the battery banks for? I'm suggesting this works like a capacitor. You have to build up a sufficient charge to pull off something really big, which is why things only happen, the real big events only happen at certain time intervals, because they don't have the power. So where does that power come from? Well, again, I think it's fair to say that it's all to do with looking up. So what if it is all to do with the dance in the sky, with these wandering stars, the alignments and things, the magnetic energy? In this game of life, you've got a good side and a bad side. It's always the good versus evil. But like I said, you're looking that way, and you're looking at infinite mirrors that just keep reflecting back. But you're also being pulled that way. See the cross with this? You got being pulled that way, you're being pulled that way. Something is wanting you to go that way, something else is trying to pull you that way. Where? Bang, slap in the middle. That's the cross. That's the centre point of it all. That's where we are. So, I've sort of go like the serpent. Wise as serpents, think like serpents. In my mind, I'm sorry, it does go all over the place, but I am trying to link in so much to give you practical examples, and also how it is reflected in the spiritual, in astrology, and in the spiritual, and what's going on internally. What it appears to be that the ones that are playing this role are like, right, you are the actors, you will be the experts of illusion, you will give the impression, because it's all about impressing into the cells on the body. They seem to have sold all their spiritual energy, or have had that very much restricted to the ultimate extreme. So it appears like we are the underdogs, but we have actually got all the power. They have nothing. They are welded to this physical, particle, solid reality. So they can only fight fire with fire, or fire in there, or as fire, or as ice, attacking the air, the spirit, and the earth, the physical. But they're trying to attack the mind. They've done the physical many times before, and it's always an assault on the mind. They can't directly get to the spirit, it would seem. And that's the bit they fear the most. So, yes, direct energy weapons, if it is a way of controlling as above, so below, so if the magnetics of the stars in astrology and their positions. Now, what could you use as a weapon? Well, let's look at the mirror. If imagination creates reality, now let's take away the heart connection. This is something Martin Leaker showed in an illustration. It's like, aha. There was it was like 4 sort of shaped pieces in a cross that had the orb sitting on top of it. And I could not help see the resemblance to the crown, which has those 4 pieces. It's also the Hungarian St. Michael's crown and many other crowns for heads of state and royal families. You've always got this thing that's got these 4 bits, and then you've got a jewel. What if the capacitor, the capacity to holding this natural energy from the earth, is transferred into that orb? The orb is put on. Your thoughts are projected out magnetically, which is connected. There's a direct energy weapon. The scepter is going to come into this. I mean, scepter, that implies 7. It implies septic, susceptible. How this actually works, the actual engineering of it, these are only ideas I'm just putting together. I'm not saying I'm right, but then it's the whole question of where do ideas come from. But I'm just trying to give you a perspective to see what are basically bad actors playing a role that some of us are. They don't. This is another thing with you can see in an everyday life. Constructive criticism. If someone says things about my videos, now I can take them personally and then my ego will come up and defend, or I can listen to what they say and not take it personally and say, actually, yeah, that's a good point. But this negative force, this control system, does take everything personally, and they try and inflict that in their system on us. So when you're a film critic and say your script doesn't ring true, they don't like it. This is why channels get pulled down. This is why things get censored, because you're touching a nerve with them. Remember what you're dealing with here. So we're going to run out of time on here. I haven't even looked at the notes that I made here. Although I think I've pretty much covered everything on that page. There are only little notes here. So yeah, this whole thing that's being displayed now, it's nothing new. I mean, buildings have facades which are faces. The song Eleanor Rigby puts on a face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? Things are revealed all the time. You just got to sort of tune in and listen. So the third part, I will talk about who and what we are and what our role is and how we actually win this, because we have already won it. It's just our perception in the particle and missing out on the 99% of the wave. So we'll come on to that in the next video. Ta-ta for now.